Keep up to date everywhere. News Talk 820 WBAP.
In the WBAP newsroom,
Byron Henry joins us right now with, we thought we would get into this, Byron, just the legalities of this move that Matt Krause wants to make. Representative out of Fort Worth, who's saying that he wants to end no-fault divorces in an effort to keep the family together, essentially. First off, let's explain what a no-fault divorce is, Byron.
Good morning, Brian. Certainly. Basically, there's 6 categories of divorce for fault in Texas, and one which most people call no fault, which is actually insupportability. It just basically means we gave a go, it's not working out, and it's not going to work out. And that's all you really have to certify to the court in order to obtain a divorce for no fault reasons or insupportability.
So what Representative Krause wants to do is eliminate that. And he says, I guess what it is just to make it a little more difficult to actually get the divorce. In fact, he wants to extend the waiting period to about 180 days, I think, too.
That's right. And, of course, no-fault divorces are in the history of our country are relatively recent phenomena in the states. Probably most of us are not old enough, or at least I don't think you and I are old enough to have lived when there was not no-fault divorce in most of the states. So with respect to no-fault divorces, it's not like it's been around since marriage has been around. In fact, it was the norm until probably the mid to late 60s and early 70s. But insupportability would not keep people from getting a divorce. It would not ban separations or prohibit divorces. What it would do is just make it a little bit more difficult and give people pause and a little bit more to think about before they actually went through with the divorce. It probably would take longer, as you said, from 60 to 180 days. You would actually have to assign blame, and it would also give the other spouse an attempt to reconcile, and probably also encourage them to at least give it one more shot before they went through the divorce based on the cost and the time factor.
Byron, it's unfortunate. I've had friends and family around the country who have gone through this divorce process, and I thought that in some states you could only file for no fault, that you couldn't cast blame. Are there some states like that?
I believe there are a few states that the only thing you do in a divorce is claim basically what we consider no fault or insupportability, and there is no rock throwing to the other side with respect to whose fault it is. So that is the norm in some states, and I think there's a balance to be struck here, both in the courts and both for society with respect to divorce. You need to allow people to end marriages that need to end, but the state also has an interest in keeping families together based on the studies. So there's financial reasons. There's children involved in a majority of these marriages. So basically the test in the courts is there any rational basis to make it a little more difficult for people to get divorced? And I think the answer to that is probably yes. Whether or not it's good policy remains to be seen, but I think the state does have an interest in keeping families together if they need to be kept together, and the studies have shown that most people admit that they could have done a little bit more to save their marriage looking back after divorce.
So if they get rid of the option, if Matt Krause's bill is able to make it through the legislature, you think it's going to pass the test with the courts as well then, huh?
Well, until very recently with the whole same-sex marriage debate, states used to be the masters of their marriage laws.
Right.
So unless it was violating something based on race, where you had some kind of absurd anti-constitutional law that says you couldn't get married based on race, or you excluded a group from marriage, as in the same-sex marriage that went on for the last few years, then states were the masters of their marriage laws with respect to age and family members and whatnot. So as long as it's even, and as long as the evidence before the legislature when they pass it gives some rational reason why you would want to keep people together, and it's not an onerous bill basically making couples have to stay together when it's basically a destructive marriage or destructive for the family, which would be counter to Representative Krause's purpose, I think the courts would look favorably on the state's interest in keeping families together at least a little bit longer.
You mentioned early on there are fault-based divorces in Texas: adultery, cruelty, abandonment, felony conviction, living apart for at least 3 years, confinement to a mental hospital, things like that. I do kind of see that a no fault does make it easier, and I wonder if it does bind you. I mean, 3 out of 7 marriages right now end in divorce in Texas. I don't know. I haven't experienced divorce myself, so I don't want it to be easy.
Well, I think you've got your intuition is right. You want to make it important. I think the real key here is that because marriage is important. I mean, that solemn bond, the way our society, it's the oldest institution known to man, predating government and all the other institutions that we all know and love so much. but the institution of marriage is so important that it would at least seem in common sense to make the ending of that bond as momentous and important as the making of the bond. And in that case, it's a test and it's an experiment of the balance between allowing people that need to be divorced to do it reasonably quickly and efficiently and financially efficiently, and then also saying, but wait, this is important to the state, this is important to the citizens, this is important for a lot of religious reasons and a lot of reasons society recognizes. So let's not just make it where you just the drive-through divorce where you just file it, pay a fee, and 60 days later you're divorced. I think there's some middle ground to be had there.
Byron Henry, always appreciate the insight. Thanks for the time. Happy New Year. Thanks for your support this year in 2016 that you've given here on the Morning News. It is 8:26 at WBA, 8:27 now at WBAP. Chelsea has the 8:30 news coming up next. Chelsea.